Welcome to this week's Therapeutic Tuesday. And this week we have a mini session with Dana. And really what we're exploring is how to support the healing journey when dealing with significant external events and stress. We also get into the importance of really cultivating a healthy relationship with our body, learning to listen and learning to build trust. So here's Dana and her mini session. So thank you for being willing to be part of one of these mini sessions. And thanks for the emails that the team forwarded me. I have read through. There's obviously quite a lot that's been going on. And we've got a kind of finite amount of time. So I'm mindful of making sure that we have enough focus to make sure that we can be to be helpful. But I think what would be good would just be to get, if you don't mind, just a bit of the kind of background. And it sounds like a little bit, some things have been improving. It sounds like over the last year, which is great. So just to get a bit of a sense of what's been happening there, and then let's come into how I can hopefully be helpful.
Yes. So up until last year at this time, I was so bad that being up and mobile for 10, 15 minutes would send my body, so the practitioners have termed it CDR, my cell danger response, in complete overload. Not as bad as the one individual you had a session with that would end up in the ER, but I would end up one-sided, semi-paralyzed. It would go back and forth from being paralyzed to having such pain that there was no movement. And that would go on for 4.5 days. For the stretch of winter, I had the neurological and the upper C-spine so severe when I'd move that I would be flat on my back, unable to move. So I was unable to look at a screen, read, even listen to music or do anything.
Wow.
And I would have the physiological upset during the night out of nothing, where the anxiety or panic, my heart rate would go, and I would feel semi-sick, not nauseated, but really sick, and it would just come out of nowhere.
Wow. And
those have calmed down quite a bit until about 8 weeks ago, when things started slowly increasing again. Now, I don't know. My first guess is it has to do with all of the things going on in the house. On the other hand, though, the biggest reason maybe I'm wondering is also the mycotoxins continually rising in my body and in my brain.
What do you put the progress that's been happening down to? So up until 8 weeks ago, it sounds like there's been a fairly, I appreciate it's a long way to go, but a meaningful improvement from where things were a year ago.
So
what do you put that to?
You go with the level 1, 2, and 3, and I was definitely at a level 1.
Yeah.
I think I was tiptoeing into a level 2.
Mm-hmm.
The other important thing is I was told not to meditate, do breath work, and I was arrested from all physical activity for most of 2019 for those reasons.
Okay.
And I was just beginning with that again.
Yeah. So was it just pure rest that you feel helped, or was there anything particular you were doing in that time?
Definitely rest. I got a lot of insight mentally because I went through the rage, the grief, the despair, the despondency, the wanting to give up, to stubbornness, to a little bit of a peaceful, not full surrender, but a little bit of a peaceful acceptance. And along with that, starting all those different neural therapies to address some of the toxins. Mm-hmm. So I was having a lot of vestibular issues along with that as well. And no one has yet figured out where it all fits.
Okay. And say a bit about what you wanted to focus on in the time that we've got today.
Well, definitely the backslide, perhaps, as it ties into the mold, because you did that, a lot of those interviews with the Fatigue Super Conference there, and insight as to perhaps where to focus or where not to waste my energy. I've also noticed as of late that my box is getting smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I'm choosing not to do things because I want to cherish that precious little rest and that feeling of levelness.
Okay.
And I know that that's very maladaptive. It's not going to last me and do me well.
Yeah. When you rest, do you feel like your nervous system is in a calm, healing state? Like, do you feel when you rest that you're actually physically resting?
That depends on the time of day. I'm glad you brought that up. My body will not allow me to nap during the day. And I understand that has been that way lifelong because I do not have much memory of my life from more than 7 years ago. So even during the day now, I can be very calm and in a resting state. It's become sort of my go-to place is if I don't have to go to an appointment and I don't have to go to work, I'm pretty much in bed, just resting. And yes, it does feel very restful unless I get very close to falling asleep and then my body will flip.
Mm-hmm.
Once it is dark, so here by 6:30 p.m., I have to be in bed, and then I was pretty much able to fall asleep within 20 minutes.
Okay.
Now it's been backing off the last few weeks again.
And when you say backing off, what does that look like?
More of that physiological anxiety, that flipping that adrenal switch, I call it,
Mm-hmm.
where maybe I've been active 5 minutes too long, and then I'll go into what I term semi-insomnia. I'll be that totally tired but not wired, but I just will not be able to fall asleep until about midnight or 1.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do have good nights, I sleep about 9.5 hours, waking up once or twice, use the restroom.
Okay. And after you've had a 9.5 hour sleep, or after you've had a kind of, I appreciate it's not sleep during the day, but you've had like a restorative rest during the day, do you feel an increase in energy as a result of that? Like, do you feel like that there is an improvement in how you feel as a result of sleep and rest?
Mornings up until a few weeks ago, most definitely.
Okay.
And I'm a morning person, so I would be ready to get up and go for a while. Resting during the day, it depends on the time of day and depends on whether or not I was at work or not. We've discerned that there's some definite environmental concerns at work. So then it takes me most of the day, sometimes 2, to get back to baseline. Otherwise, yes. If I lay down for an hour or 2, yes, I will rebound a little bit.
Okay, good. Say a bit more about the last couple of months then of what's been happening.
It's culminated to where the financing and the contractors have been able to start putting together, starting the second phase of the work on the house for the mold issues. And I'm the one handling all of the paperwork, making sure that everything goes through, scheduling the contractors, assuring that they're using non-toxic materials and products. And even though I don't fret consciously over it, I wonder if that hasn't taken its toll.
Yeah.
And played in, because I don't think I have any reserves built up.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't know is how to separate that, because it appears to be that this might be going on for most, if not all, of the year 2020.
Okay.
I need to
so it's something that it's important to figure out the most healthy way you can be in relationship to.
Yes. Whilst also understanding that my mold levels keep rising and that I don't go into that fear overload again. Oh, they're working on the house. Am I now going to get super ill in other aspects?
Yeah. What is your relationship like? So when you're dealing with a project, like for example, the kind of the work that's happening on the house, what's your typical way of relating to that? So is it a kind of relationship of kind of trust it, let it be, let it go at its own speed? Is there a sense of underlying fear and I've got to kind of manage every detail? Is there a sense of I've just got to force this to happen? Like, how do you find yourself in relationship to the work that needs to be done?
I've gone through all of those waves. This is also the first time that I've ever had to take on a project this monumental, and it being home, not work or any other relation. So at first it was, okay, I know exactly what I need in order to regain health because of all these years of doing the research and dealing with the practitioners. I need to assure that I find the right people and they need to know exactly. To okay, I need to make sure that everyone's on schedule and that everything will happen as it needs to, and probably that's because I've formed a little bit of a relationship with the lead contractor. To now, I don't worry, I trust. We stay in touch via phone or via text, and we just check in, and it just consciously for me, it's developed trust, and it doesn't bother me on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. How recent is that feeling of trust with the contractor?
Well, I met him for the first time 7 months ago, and in earnest began about 12 weeks ago. That's probably developed, right around that 8-week mark as well.
Okay. Because what I'm trying to get a sense of is there's clearly a level of external stress that's happening, like having any kind of significant work done that you're having to kind of project manage and be responsible for and deal with kind of finances and logistics. Like there's a kind of external objective reality that there's stress that's there. And then there's how you are existing in relationship to that. And, there's what people sometimes I think I would be saying is, oh, just trust, let it go, and it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Actually, that's often not helpful because if you're not paying attention, stuff goes wrong. You end up with more stress to deal with. So it's finding that kind of sweet spot where when you need to pay attention, you're paying attention, and when it's time to let go and surrender, you're able to let go and surrender. And if we've had a history of having, for example, a strong achiever pattern, that our way of dealing with things is like to kind of to force and to push and to kind of make happen, then we have a project like this, then it becomes very hard to surrender and let go because we're in that pattern of I need to kind of to do and to make happen. Or if our pattern is one of anxiety and we kind of keep things on track by worrying about all the things that could possibly go wrong, that sometimes that's helpful because we're kind of predicting potential issues. But then when it's time to let go, we're still in that mode of trying to figure out and to understand. So it's a little bit like kind of peak performance in athletics, that people tend to think that it's all about how does someone train more effectively? How does someone prepare better? But actually, often the progress with sports people is how do you accelerate the effectiveness of the repair time? Like, how do you make the recovery time more efficient and more effective? So I often think when you're dealing with a significant external stress, the resolution is not to just surrender and abdicate any responsibility. When you need to be on it, you need to be on it. When you don't need to be on it, how well do you then let your system settle and relax and come into a healing state?
That's probably my key concern. I wouldn't know how to answer that. Consciously, I don't know how I separate those. I do know that I fret less, I worry way less, and I do not micromanage the way that I did. I have somewhere in my brain and in my body been able to make peace and come to a sense of surrender enough that, all right, we have a timeline. Okay, that one's over with. Now it's out of my hands. I will just trust that it will be handled. And yes, take care of the day-to-day things. Make sure the scheduling's appropriate. Make sure that the materials are no VOC versus the cheapest and such. And then try to just go on with my day. I still am stuck in, though, that I think I try to be active in some capacity, mentally or physically, throughout the day, perhaps so I don't fall apart emotionally, maybe.
So say a bit more about that.
I wonder if sometimes I don't busy myself with actual tasks, be it paperwork, computer work, or even housework, so that I don't have too much idle time where perhaps my brain would go to processing old issues, traumas, and I might fall apart. How would I pull myself together already dealing with the MECFS, not knowing adrenal exhaustion, not knowing where I'm coming from?
Yeah. What happens when you do have kind of quote unquote idle time? Do you have time where you're not actively doing project management or working or kind of doing admin that you just allow yourself to settle and to relax and to be? Or is there always a sense of you're doing something to try and keep your system busy?
No, there's definitely a sense of just relaxing, just being in the moment, mostly with my dog Serenity. The weather here is not conducive to spending much time even sitting outside right now. So we're just sitting, relaxing, or listening to, be it you in the background on YouTube or a podcast, or even just silence. I can't read much yet because of the neurological things, and I do not watch TV or that. So there's very little screen time.
Okay.
And I'm not much for socializing. I've kind of pulled back from that too. Most people are active after work and my body is done by then. So I've kind of become sort of a semi-recluse.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What's your relationship like with your body? Given some of the things that, kind of beyond kind of what's necessary to kind of share kind of on camera, but knowing a little about what you shared, some of the kind of your background and history, like what's your relationship these days like with your body, with your kind of physical body, your emotional body? How is that?
I would call that up as a very large positive transition as well.
Okay.
I've come to a place, and I'll keep borrowing your phrases, surrendering to, there's nothing I can do about this right now. I can accept it, and my body will heal in the order that it will heal in. I have no control over it. And I'm doing all I can. So let's try not to fret over it, obsess over it. So usually for the entire day, it doesn't, again, consciously enter my mind at all. When it gets to be about 6:37 p.m., if I'm having those crash times, that's when it comes in. An example, last evening, knowing that we would be doing this today, obviously, I was a little bit nervous. And my brain did flip into that really large inner critic, self-deprecating, for about an hour and a half, right before bed.
And how did you manage that? How did you switch that off?
What I did is I got my hot water bottles to help me calm down, laid in bed, turned off the lights, and just kind of directed it towards let's go to sleep. Didn't work very well, but it did calm things down.
Yeah. So my sense is that you're doing a lot. It sounds like you're doing a lot of good things. And it sounds like you've come like I'm always a student of what's working for someone. And if we look back at the last 12 months, and I appreciate it's been a bit bumpier the last 8 weeks, but if we look at the last kind of 12 months, it sounds like there's been a significant improvement in what's happening. So when I'm looking at a case, it's like the first thing I'm looking at is there someone getting better? Is there someone on the general trend? Are they getting better or are they getting worse? And overall, if we take the last 12 months, even though there's been a bump the last couple of months, you are on a path of improvement. It's then looking at, well, how do we protect the progress that's there? We can come back to that a little bit in a minute. It's then once we've got that progress protected, how do we start to accelerate that progress that's happening? How do we kind of encourage it to happen more quickly? And then it's how do we stabilize that kind of accelerated progress? I think the question here is definitely one of how do we stabilize in a sense where you are and kind of protect the progress that's been happening. And I think part of that is that another metaphor that I often use, it's like bouncing the boundaries. And if that was your comfort zone before, it's like you've had to stretch the last couple of months because you've gone from being in a kind of, sounds like in a healing state, but in somewhat in isolation to dealing with the world. And then there's suddenly this new demand in terms of the kind of work that's happening on the house and the project managing and the details and the kind of the money and all the kind of pieces that go with that. And that's been quite a big stretch in your capacity. And inevitably, there's been some kind of bumps and ripples and kind of impact of that. What we want to be able to do is to kind of figure out how to be able to keep your nervous system in a relatively calm state despite the fact that there's that kind of growth and there's that stretch in terms of what you're doing, to then hopefully encourage back to the progress of where you were a few months ago. And whereas before, progress would have been measured over that time of the fact that you had more capacity, you could get out a little bit more, you could do a bit more. The progress now is to get back to where you were before while still managing what it is that you're managing. And that's kind of growing your capacity and growing your ability to maintain a calm, healing state in your system, despite the fact that you're having to deal with these various demands and stimuluses.
Yes, and may I say, this I tried to see as a positive as well. I believe if this would have happened 2 years ago, the same project needs, I likely would have plowed through it. Stubbornness, just full force ahead, go nonstop, and not allowed my body to even tell me that I'm crashing and it's not working. Yeah. So in a twisted way, I can see somewhere where even this is a positive.
Yeah.
It's just not feeling very good.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. One of the things that people, I think is a slightly perverse observation on my side is that sometimes a sign of progress is that we get the consequence faster. So, for example, someone will push themselves to do something and they would be fine that day, fine the day after, then have an enormous crash and spend a week recovering from it. And then the sign of progress is that they actually feel tired on the day that it's happening. They're actually now getting the information to listen to so they can slow down and do less to not have the much bigger consequence further down the line. So the fact that your body is talking to you over the last couple of months and it's saying, well, hang on, this kind of feels like quite a lot that's happening. And you're actually able to listen to that and go, yeah, man, like I can kind of feel the impact. I need to kind of try and rest the best I can, minimize too much, any other kind of stress and things that are happening. I agree. I think that's progress because you could have powered through, got through it, and then spent 2 years recovering from the impact of it.
I came close to that. I almost took a different job. And decided that it was not worth it. My quality of life improving and my health continuing to grow was more important.
Right.
I came very close because I believe now in hindsight, I was perhaps looking at using it as a form of escape to not having to deal with my body.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question I think then becomes, what could you do that would help support yourself through this next period of time? Like the 2020 is going to be pretty much, more of the same in terms of project management and kind of keep an eye on details. How can you best support yourself in when it's time to switch off and let go, switch off and let go? And when it's time to deal with things, avoiding yourself going into the kind of achiever and pushing. Like what can you do to support yourself?
That is my biggest question. I have the disconnect with my conscious and my subconscious there because I really do not think that I consciously fret or overconcentrate or even obsess over these things. It's all right. I have to take care of my morning check-ins with the contractor and everything. And then the rest of the day, I know the schedule, that day's dealt with, and it doesn't process consciously in my brain. Somewhere I have that disconnect that I'm not aware that it's going on subconsciously. And that's my biggest question is how may I assist in getting in better touch with that so that I can get through this year in a better way?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the issue here is that the relationship between you and your body historically, because of some of the things that have happened in the past, is a kind of split off relationship. Like in a sense that you've had to learn to just kind of disconnect and not be in touch. And I think part of the reason why you're making progress is you've been getting more in touch with your body. You've been learning to listen to your body. You've been learning to rest. You've been learning to cultivate being in a healing state. So I think the kind of objective over the coming kind of months here is really to find the answer to that question. Like, what are the signs from your body? Like when your body is starting to communicate, how is it doing that? And it might be things like that you notice your mind is just going a little bit faster, or it may be that you notice that your breathing is a little bit tighter, or it might be that you notice that you're more insular, like you're kind of disconnecting, you're pulling back from the world, like you're retreating back because there's There's a sense of being overwhelmed. Or it might be that you notice that that your mind goes to fantasize about the future as a way of avoiding being in the now, or it goes to the past. So sometimes they can be quite subtle, these signs, and sometimes they're not as obvious as a raging anxiety pattern where we're worrying about the consequence of something. But it's looking for those subtle clues that your body is potentially in a subtle state of stress.
Sometimes when I listen to your guided meditations that you now have, there are times when I can get through one in its entirety. There are times where within the first few seconds, there's something that my body says, turn it off right away, or that would happen anywhere along that duration of your meditation. Is that a place where perhaps it would be good to keep pushing those boundaries, or to pull back and just sit with what the body is saying it needs and just explore that for a few weeks or perhaps a couple of months?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tricky answer, because sometimes actually we just need to stay with the practice, and actually in staying with the practice, things settle. But I would say, given kind of your background, I would say what would be interesting here would be to be really asking, almost like an internal kind of inquiry, like, why does my body feel irritated? Like, why does my body want to stop? Like, what's the feeling? What's the location of that? What's the emotion that's behind that? Like, it's learning to speak the language of your body. Like, it's that kind of, that reconnection with your body, which is happening, is partly learning to communicate and learning to decipher the communications and understand what it is that it's trying to communicate to you.
And that fine tunes as it goes along. I believe right now I would classify them always as either terror or fear.
Right.
Okay, stop, do something else.
Yeah. It sounds like that it comes in as an overwhelm and an avoidance strategy. So it's like it's terror or it's fear. So it's get busy doing something else, or distract focus, or, it's a kind of way of getting away from the feeling. And that's okay. Like, I'm not saying that you have to force yourself to sit in whatever you're feeling, but you want to find that kind of edge where you're not forcing yourself, but you are learning to be really curious. Like, what's actually going on here? Like, why is it that I want to distract away? Like, what am I feeling? Okay, I'm feeling terror. Where in my body do I feel terror? Is it okay that I feel terror? And it's like, it's working on your relationship to those feelings. And it's almost like building the internal trust with those feelings, and it's okay to feel that way, rather than having to distract and avoid and get away from, to just let yourself be with those feelings.
That makes a lot of sense. Another question I would have then would be, at times, would my body perhaps be lending me that full out, kind of that hit the wall exhaustion as a avoidance techniques, perhaps?
Yeah, it could be. And it could also be that it's giving you a bunch of other signals before that point that have been ignored. And then that's the consequence of not being in touch, if that makes sense.
I would say that is true at least half the time, that I'm ignoring them for reasons that I have to get to an appointment or I need to finish work.
Yeah.
So would the suggestion be there to push the boundaries a little bit, or literally still do the whole rest as if you were in stage one and just take downtime as much as you can at the slightest hint?
Yeah, what we're really trying to do is to listen to what your body is saying in such a way that, and it's not always practically possible, but if your body is asking for rest, you're able to give it rest, as opposed to your body's asking for rest and you're saying, well, I've got 10 things on my to-do list and tough, I've got to get them done. So that, because each time we do that, in a sense, we're slightly re-traumatizing our body, because it's asking for something and we're rejecting it. So inevitably, there is the reality of life, and it isn't always as simple as body says rest and we rest, because actually the thing you're trying to get done, like dealing with the mold issue in the house, is actually the thing which is going to make ultimately your environment be more supportive and easier. But it's doing it in such a way which is kind of ultimately moving towards the rebuilding of trust and rebuilding of that relationship.
So where I've taken time off from all appointments and past for a couple of weeks, and found a lot of rest, felt better until I reintegrated all of my doctor appointments. And then my body would go into an overload of CDR and I would have terrible outcomes for having rested.
Right.
And returning to the treatments.
Well, I would say, is it terrible outcomes for having rested, or is it terrible outcomes for taking on too many things too quickly?
For an example, I would just use chiropractic. So resting from receiving my adjustments, which right now I still, to keep an adjustment holding, need to go 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
When I've gotten to being so exhausted that I've taken a rest and done nothing for 2 weeks, then returning, those chiropractic adjustments the first few times will have horrific reaction responses in my body. So that's where I'm trying to find that happy medium, the balance.
Yeah.
Do you rest or do you just keep going to the appointments? That's something to play with further.
Yeah, it's a hard one to comment on without going into much more detail about the outcome and the purpose of the chiropractic appointments. But what I would say is generally doing an approach where you're pushing your body hard like that is often not helpful. The body does have its own innate wisdom and its own innate capacity towards healing. And if we're constantly forcing it and pushing it and dragging it here and making it do that, then all of those things are going against being in a healing state. And the body can also heal itself, but it needs to have access to those resources and it needs to be in a healing state to be able to do that. So sometimes the more intervention we do and the more appointments we need to get to and the more things we have to remember to do, the danger is the net result of all of that is actually just a load more stress in the system.
And that perhaps has been raising my chronic inflammation as well, just that treadmill running.
Right.
As you were just relaying that.
These things should be in support of your body being able to heal, not kind of like, well, if I don't do this, I won't recover. And I don't do this, I won't recover. And I've got to, because suddenly your whole life becomes an enormous list of stresses towards recovery. And if you're a driven person, determined person by nature, you'll make all those things happen. But actually the price of that is your body's not able to heal because there's not enough healing capacity available because it's all been drained getting through all of these things.
So sit back, relax a little, perhaps take a break from a few of the modalities,
right,
and see where it leads in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, and listen to your body in the process. Like your body is communicating with you. Your body is giving you feedback. It may just be you're too busy to listen to it, or you're too determined that this is what needs to happen. But if you're kind of if you're feeling a sense of energy coming back and progress through resting, and then you go off and do something and then you feel terrible for doing it, I think that's important information.
To not repeat it to that extent, or perhaps not that very activity.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's seeing your body's feedback as valid, important information, as opposed to, as much as the whole cell danger response theory is something that I talk about, and I think it's a very, very helpful kind of way of understanding things. The danger can be that we kind of go, oh, well, that's just my cell danger response, and actually I need to do this treatment. But I would look at it is your body's communicating, and that's important information, and it's not something just to be overridden.
Yes, that's very wise. Yes.
And I think that also stands for everything else that's happening. Like it sounds like you're doing some quite disruptive and understandably so, but significant things. And as much as possible, you want to be able to go at your body's own pace and listen to your body in the process of doing that.
And not worry about rescheduling and taking care of others' feelings for needing to reschedule.
Yeah.
Just listen to myself.
Yeah. And remember that you're doing all of this to support your healing. So if it's consistently kind of irritating and in the way of your healing, then that's not so helpful. And you're working on building a partnership and a relationship with your body. And all good partnerships and all good relationships have listening and have mutual dialogue. And it's not just a case of just your body dictates everything. Of course, there are things that you need to do that need to happen, but it's doing it in collaboration with your body rather than just ignoring and overriding your body.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Any final questions that you've got? Obviously, I know there's a kind of big topic.
I really appreciate it.
Kind of way to kind of take forward what we've been talking about. Any questions that you have?
I think we covered it. Actually, no, I think pretty much everything that was on my mind and which I relayed, I think that this was very comprehensive. Thank you very, very much.
No, you're really welcome, and good luck with it. It sounds like you know some ambitious and challenging stuff that you're doing, but well done for having the courage to kind of do what needs to be done. And yeah, I just really encourage you to listen to your body, work on your relationship with your body, and go gently and be gentle with yourself.
Yes, I will work on practicing that some more.
Okay, great stuff. Best of luck, and drop me a note in the coming weeks or month or two, and just let me know how you're doing.
I will definitely do that, Alex. Thank you very much. I wish you a wonderful week.
Brilliant.
And happy 2020.
Indeed. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Good to chat. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I hope you found that helpful. Remember, there's a growing library or archive of these mini sessions. So if you found this helpful, do check those out. Tomorrow, it's Wellness Wednesday, and we have the first in a series of 3 videos with Kirsty Cullen, Director of Nutrition here at the Optimal Health Clinic, exploring the role of the adrenals in fatigue, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and that group of conditions. And in the first video tomorrow, we get into what the adrenals really are and why they can be so critical and so important. So look forward to talking with you tomorrow.